Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tin Man Score Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm starting off my Midnight Tales marathon for you guys. And the first video I'll be reacting to is 4 Scary True Valentine's Day Horror Stories. Now, I know what you're thinking. Valentine's Day is already over. I get it, but we're still in the month of February at this moment that I'm recording right now. So I figured, why not? So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the back. Okie dokie, here we go.
I've never been a huge fan of Valentine's Day. It always felt like one of those holidays where people either rubbed their happiness in your face or drowned themselves in self-pity. But last year, I had a reason to dread it for a completely different reason. I had been single for a while, and my best friend Lisa convinced me to download a dating app. Just to see what's out there, she said. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a couple of awkward conversations at best, but then I matched with a guy named Adam. He was normal, almost too normal. Cute, well-spoken, worked as a freelance photographer. We texted for about a week before he asked me out for Valentine's Day. At first, I hesitated. It felt a little cliché to go on a first date on the most romantic day of the year.
Yeah, I'm kind of like her because Valentine's Day comes around and it's just like another day for me. Let's get back to the video. I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw that in there.
But he had this easygoing charm about him, so I said yes. We agreed to meet at a small, cozy Italian restaurant downtown. Public place, early evening, safe enough. When I got there, I immediately spotted him waiting by the entrance, holding a bouquet of red roses. It was a nice gesture, but something about it made me uneasy. It felt off, like something you'd do for a girlfriend, not someone you were meeting for the first time. I shook it off, smiled, and thanked him for the flowers. Dinner started fine, but as the night went on, I noticed little things that made my stomach twist.
What?
He barely touched his food, but he stared at me, constantly. He asked me strange, overly personal questions, like whether I lived alone or if my apartment had security cameras.
Okay, that'd be like red flags for me. Because I'd be like, are you going to eat your food? And why you need to know all this information? But I got a feeling that he might take advantage of her and rob her or something. I don't know. I don't want to jump into conclusions. Let's continue.
When I tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, he'd somehow circle back to something unsettling. At one point, I made a joke about being bad at cooking, and he said, "That's okay. You won't need to cook much when you're living with me." He laughed, but his eyes were serious. I forced a chuckle, hoping I was imagining things. The real alarm bells went off when I excused myself to go to the restroom. As I got up, he grabbed my wrist, tight. "Don't be too long," he said, his nails digging into my skin. I nodded, suddenly desperate to get away, even if just for a minute. I went to the bathroom and texted Lisa, telling her I had a bad feeling. She immediately called me. I picked up, whispering that I needed an excuse to leave. That's when I heard it, the sound of the door creaking open. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see Adam peeking inside. "I was worried," he said, smiling like he hadn't just invaded my privacy.
Okay, I could tell for a fact that he's one of them controlling type people who can't stand to wait for his woman any longer. I mean, she got to use the bathroom, dude. Let her use the bathroom. Yeah, I'll be like telling my friend to come up with an excuse to leave or call the cops for me.
"You were taking a while." I forced a smile, my heart hammering in my chest. "Just freshening up. I'll be right out." He hesitated for a second before nodding and leaving. My hands were shaking as I texted Lisa again. She told me to get out, now. I took a deep breath, left the bathroom, and walked straight to the waiter. I told him I felt unsafe, and he was kind enough to pretend I had a phone call and needed to step outside. I grabbed my coat and bolted. The whole way home, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see Adam following me. My phone buzzed. Texts from him. Where did you go? Are you okay? I don't like games. Call me. I blocked his number the moment I stepped inside my apartment, locking every possible entry point. But the real nightmare wasn't over yet.
Well, I'm glad she blocked his number, but I would have been saving all those messages so if something does go bad, she has something to show to the cops to prove that he's crazy. But I'm glad that the waiter helped her get out of that situation with that guy.
I woke up to a notification from my apartment security app. There was motion detected outside my door at 3:12 a.m. My blood ran cold as I clicked on the video. It was Adam, standing there, holding another bouquet of red roses. He knocked once, then just stood still, staring at my door for what felt like forever. Then slowly, he bent down and slid something under the door, a single envelope. I waited until I was sure he was gone before I approached it. My hands trembled as I picked it up and pulled out the note inside. You ruined our first date. Don't do it again. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I went straight to the police with all the evidence I had.
Thank
The
you.
texts, the security footage, the note. They took it seriously, issued a temporary restraining order, and advised me to stay somewhere safe. I crashed at Lisa's for a week, and when I finally went home, I had my locks changed and installed extra cameras. Adam never showed up again. His dating profile disappeared, and I never heard from him again. But to this day, I don't go on first dates without telling someone exactly where I am.
That's a good idea. If I ever started dating, I'd be letting my folks know where I'm going to be at, just so if anything does go wrong, then they'll know. But yeah, this is why I feel uncomfortable using any dating apps because you never know what wacko would use it just to lure in somebody to date, but then make them feel uncomfortable, you know? Ooh, man, I'm glad she went to the cops because if she didn't, that guy would have kept on bothering her.
I used to work the late shift at a small flower shop in my town. It was a quiet job most of the time, except around holidays, especially Valentine's Day. That's when we were slammed with orders.
Oh, I bet it would be slammed with orders because people really want to give their Valentines some flowers. So I know, but they'll be like hustling, bustling, trying to put an order together and get it out the door. But anyway, let's continue.
Men rushing in last minute, couples picking out arrangements together, and the occasional sad-eyed person buying flowers for an ex they swore they were totally over. Last year, my boss asked me to stay late on Valentine's night to finish up some deliveries. Normally we closed at 8, but since so many people were scrambling for last-minute orders, we extended our hours. I didn't mind too much. The extra cash was nice, and I didn't have any special plans anyway. Most of the deliveries were straightforward, handing off bouquets to giddy women at apartment doors, dropping arrangements at fancy restaurants where guys had them scheduled to be waiting at their tables. It wasn't until my second-to-last delivery that the night took a turn. The order was for a woman named Melissa, and the note attached just read, "For my one and only." No name, no signature, just those 5 words. The address was in a residential neighborhood about 15 minutes away, and I figured it was some guy sending his girlfriend or wife flowers to surprise her. Nothing unusual. When I pulled up, the house was dark, except for a small porch light. I double-checked the address on my phone before getting out, bouquet in hand. As I walked up to the door, I noticed something odd. There were no decorations, no signs of Valentine's Day inside. Usually, on a night like this, you'd at least see candles in the window or a car in the driveway. I knocked twice. No answer. I waited a few seconds, then knocked again. Finally, I heard movement inside. The door opened just a crack, and a woman peeked out. She looked exhausted, like she'd been crying. Her eyes flicked to the flowers in my hand, and instead of looking happy, she tensed up. "Melissa?" I asked, holding up the bouquet. She hesitated before nodding. "Who sent these?" I glanced at the note. It doesn't say, just says, "For my one and only." Her face went pale. She looked behind her, then back at me. "I didn't order these." "That's okay," I said quickly, assuming it was just an unexpected gift from her boyfriend or husband. "Maybe they're from your partner?" She shook her head fast. "No, I don't have one." At this point, I was starting to feel uneasy. I'd done hundreds of flower deliveries before, and usually people were happy, or at least indifferent.
Well, one thing, if nobody don't come to the door, I'll just drop the flowers off on the porch and then leave. But if the lady comes to the door and says, I don't have no partner I'm dating, then that would be like a red flag, like, okay, she got a stalker that just won't leave her alone.
But Melissa looked scared. "I don't want them," she whispered. Her eyes darted around like she was waiting for something, or someone. "Please take them back." I wasn't sure what to do. It wasn't like I could just return them to the shop. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Maybe a friend?" "No." Her voice was firm this time. "Take them away, please." I wasn't about to argue. I nodded, muttered something about policy, and backed away. As I walked back to my car, I glanced over my shoulder. Melissa was still standing in the doorway, staring out into the night like she expected someone to be watching her. I drove off, but I couldn't shake the weird feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. When I got back to the shop, I told my boss what happened. She frowned and checked the order history. "That's weird," she murmured. "The order came through our online system, but it doesn't have a customer name attached." That wasn't normal. Every online order had to have a name and billing info. "Can you check the payment details?" I asked. She clicked around on the screen, then froze. It was paid in cash. Someone came in earlier today and placed it in person. I waited, but she didn't say anything else. "Who placed it?" She hesitated before pulling up the security footage. We both leaned in as she fast-forwarded through the day's recordings. Around noon, a man walked in wearing a dark hoodie, head down. He approached the counter, slid some cash across, and wrote the note himself. His face was mostly hidden by the hoodie, but something about his posture, the way he stood, made my skin crawl. "Did he say anything when he ordered?" I asked. My boss shook her head. "I wasn't here, but Lily took the order. She said he didn't talk much, just handed her the note and left as soon as he paid." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. "Do you still have the original paper he wrote on?" She nodded and dug through the drawer where we kept written orders before logging them digitally. When she pulled it out, my breath hitched. The handwriting was messy, hurried. But the thing that got me was the indentation, like he'd pressed down hard. I ran my fingers over the paper. Something felt off about it, so I tilted it slightly toward the light. And that's when I saw it. Underneath the words, "For my one and only," barely visible, was another set of letters. Faint, as if someone had written something else before erasing it. It said, "I found you." I don't know why, but my blood ran cold. I had the sickening realization that Melissa hadn't been excited or surprised by the flowers because she knew exactly who sent them.
Yeah, my blood ran cold too if I found a note that said I found you.
And she wanted no part of it. I don't know what happened after that. I never saw Melissa again. My boss called her the next morning to check in, but there was no answer. A few days later, I read a short article buried in the local news about a woman in that same neighborhood filing a police report for a stalker who had been watching her for months. No arrests were made. I quit the flower shop a few weeks later. Now, whenever I see bouquets of red roses on Valentine's Day, I wonder how many of them are sent by people who genuinely love someone, and how many are sent by someone who refuses to let go.
That is true. You may have some people that are really in love and they sent flowers to show their dedication to a certain someone, but then you never know if somebody sent flowers to somebody that you can't let go, like you said, or it might be a stalker. You never know nowadays. I hope they do catch that guy, though.
Valentine's Day has never really been my thing. My friend Megan convinced me to at least go out for dinner. She said it was depressing to sit at home alone while couples flooded social media with pictures of fancy dates. She picked a small restaurant a few blocks from my apartment. It was one of those places that felt cozy rather than pretentious. Dim lighting, soft music, the smell of garlic and warm bread filling the air. We got a small booth near the window, ordered wine, and spent the first half of the night people watching. There was the couple that clearly just started dating, the guy nervously checking his watch. The older married pair that barely spoke, just ate in silence. And then, of course, the awkward first date couple, the woman smiling politely while the guy rambled on about himself. Everything was normal until I noticed a man sitting alone at the bar. He wasn't eating, just sipping a drink and staring in our direction. He looked about mid-40s, neatly dressed, but something about him felt off. He wasn't watching the game on the TV above the bar. He wasn't checking his phone. His eyes were fixed on our table. I nudged Megan. That guy at the bar is creeping me out. She glanced over quickly and made a face. Maybe he's waiting for a date? Then why is he staring? Maybe he thinks he knows you. I shook my head. I'd remember him. We tried to ignore it, focusing on our meal, but every time I glanced up, he was still looking.
Yeah, at this point, I'll be like telling my significant other the same thing. Why is that guy looking at us, like trying to be in a whisper, trying to make it not noticeable to him? Because, yeah, that is kind of weird that he's fixated on them and not nobody else. Something tells me he ain't up to no good and he might follow him.
Not eating, not talking to the bartender, just watching. My stomach started to knot. Then, as we finished our meal, he stood up. I braced myself, expecting him to walk past us. Instead, he stopped at our table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm, almost friendly. "I just wanted to say you look familiar." I forced a tight smile. "I don't think we've met." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Maybe I'm mistaken." He turned slightly, then added, "Happy Valentine's Day." Then he left. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What the hell was that? Megan shuddered. That was weird.
Yeah, that would be weird.
We brushed it off as some random guy being socially awkward, paid our bill, and left. The night was cold, and we decided to walk home together since Megan's place was just a block from mine. We talked about work, TV shows, anything to shake off the weirdness from the restaurant. But as we neared my building, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The man from the restaurant was across the street, walking at our pace. I didn't say anything at first, not wanting to freak Megan out.
See, what did I tell you? He's following them. Oh boy, I'll be going down the alley to where he can't find you.
But when we stopped at the crosswalk, he did too. When we started walking again, so did he. Megan must have seen my face go pale because she asked, "What's wrong?" I whispered, "Don't look, but he's following us." She immediately grabbed my arm. What do we do? We were still a few minutes from my apartment, and I didn't want to lead him there. I quickly made a decision. Let's go to that convenience store on the corner. Act normal. We cut across the street and into the brightly lit store, pretending to browse. Through the glass door, I saw him hesitate outside, hands in his coat pockets. He lingered for a few seconds, then turned and kept walking. We waited 10 minutes before leaving, taking a different route to my building. I barely slept that night. Every noise made me jump, and I checked the locks 3 times before finally forcing myself to lie down. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he just lived in the neighborhood. That's what I told myself until the next morning. I woke up to a text from an unknown number. I knew I recognized you. See you soon. I felt sick. My number wasn't public, and I hadn't given it to anyone new. Megan swore she hadn't mentioned my name out loud at the restaurant. The only explanation was that he had followed me long enough to figure out who I was. I called the police. They took it seriously, but there wasn't much they could do with just a text message. I changed my number, took different routes to work, and didn't go anywhere alone for weeks. Eventually, the fear faded. The messages never came again. But every time I go out to eat now, I scan the room, looking for anyone watching too closely. I don't walk home alone anymore, and I never assume a strange man staring at me is harmless, because sometimes they aren't.
Lord, that would creep me out. If somebody just sent me a text and I didn't even give them a number. I'll be trying to find a new apartment quick before he does find out where you live. Even though he didn't find you, thank God. I still want to take the chance.
Last year's Valentine's Day was supposed to be uneventful. I had no plans, no date, and no interest in pretending to enjoy a holiday that had never really worked out in my favor. My best friend, Eric, tried convincing me to go out, but I wasn't in the mood to sit at a bar and watch couples feed each other overpriced desserts. Instead, I picked up some takeout and headed home, ready to call it a night. I lived in a pretty quiet apartment complex, the kind where people kept to themselves. The parking lot was half empty when I pulled in, and the only other person I saw was a woman standing by the entrance. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there, hands in the pockets of her long coat, looking down at her feet. At first, I didn't think much of it. People loitered outside all the time, waiting for rides or taking a smoke break. But as I walked toward my building, she lifted her head and looked straight at me. I don't know how to explain it, but something about the way she stared made me uneasy. It wasn't casual or curious. It was expectant, like she had been waiting for me. I hesitated, but I didn't want to be rude, so I gave a polite nod and kept walking. As I passed her, she spoke. "Happy Valentine's Day, Daniel." I stopped. My name isn't exactly rare, but I didn't recognize her. Do I know you?" I asked, turning slightly to face her. She smiled. "You don't remember me?" I racked my brain, trying to place her. She was around my age, maybe late 20s, with shoulder-length dark hair and pale skin. Nothing about her seemed familiar. "I don't think so," I said carefully. Her smile didn't fade. "That's okay. I remember you." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten.
Oh, yeah, it would make my stomach tighten because I would have remembered someone if we started a conversation because I'd be like, oh, yeah, now I know you. But if it doesn't come to memory, I'll be like, okay, this is a potential stalker person.
I forced a polite chuckle. "Sorry, I think you have the wrong guy." She shook her head, her eyes locked onto mine. "No, I don't." I didn't know how to respond. My instincts told me to walk away, but my curiosity kept me frozen for a few more seconds. Finally, I muttered, "Well, have a good night," and turned toward the entrance. I could feel her watching me the entire way inside. When I got to my apartment, I double-locked my door, feeling stupid for how rattled I was. Maybe she was just messing with me. Maybe it was some weird prank. I tried to shake it off, eat my dinner, and zone out to a movie, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. Around 11 p.m., I was getting ready for bed when I got a text from an unknown number. "I waited a long time for tonight." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. My number wasn't listed anywhere. and I hadn't given it out to anyone new recently. I typed back quickly. Who is this? The response came almost instantly. You'll remember soon. That was it. No explanation, no name. I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak in my apartment made me jump. I kept checking the peephole, half expecting to see her standing outside my door. But morning came, and nothing happened. No more texts, no sign of her. I convinced myself that it was just some strange mistake. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe she was just some unhinged ex of a guy who looked like me. But then, a few nights later, I found something taped to my door. It was a photograph, an old one, a group picture from my high school taken over a decade ago. I recognized my 17-year-old self immediately, standing with a group of friends at a school event. I scanned the faces, looking for her. Then I found her. She was in the background, slightly out of focus, standing alone. She wasn't part of the group. I didn't remember her being there. I didn't remember her at all. Underneath the photo, in the same neat handwriting from the text, were 3 words. I never forgot. I called the police. I didn't know what else to do. They took it seriously, but since there was no real crime committed, they couldn't do much besides file a report. They suggested I stay aware of my surroundings and call if she showed up again. She never did. Weeks passed, then months. No more texts, no more photos. I should have felt relieved, but instead I felt like I was waiting for another sign that she was still watching. I never figured out how she found me, how she knew my number, or why she chose that night to remind me of her existence.
The only thing I could come up with was it was probably a kid that might have had a crush on that person. I mean, I know that's crazy to think of because she's taking it to the extreme of just saying like hello to that guy and he don't even remember her, and then start leaving text on his phone and leaving a picture. Yeah, that's taking it way too far. So this person's really messed up in the mind. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this Midnight Tales video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications for more Midnight Tales reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap. Have a nice day.